Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy and welcome back to the Dollhouse. Which is really funny because I know of a place called the... Anyways, today we're reading pages 18 to 43, which in total is 25 pages, which is a lot of reading, which we haven't done before in a long time. So, without further ado, for this long video, let's begin. Chapter 3. Olivia hadn't made it in her first class before being taken. Hell, she hadn't even slept in her new bed of residence. He puzzled her a long time in her prison, wondering, like most people who had done something terrible happen to them, how she could have avoided it. How did she not sense that she was bearing down on her? A monolith of menace. How could it happen in such a suddenness? Like walking off a cliff, having no idea the path ended. 1 second you're whistling along, and the next you're falling through the sky, and your face studying in confusion. No warning, no expectation is a disaster. And even after a lifetime of reading and seeing the news on TV relating to terrors of natural disasters or man-made ones, it never occurred to her that such things could happen to her. It seemed those terrible things happened far away, so far away people with names and didn't know of faces she had never seen. Might as well have happened to the moon. One thing she was sure, she was a goddamn psychic. No tarot readings for her in the future. After her dad left her university amidst luggage and boxes, she examined her new home for the next year. More like a glorified closet. She thought if she stretched out her arms, she would maybe touch both walls. She tried it and she could. Her fingertips brushed the edge of encounters of those cinder block walls, painted a sunny yellow. To began the tedious process of unpacking. She propped open a door that she could hear the students in the hall laughing and moving the backdrop by competing music genres from different rooms. Busy, happy sounds. But Olivia decided to contribute. She searched her boxes, found a sound dock, and plugged it in. Easy to get lost in the music while your hands bruise themselves on answerless chords. Olivia believed music made everything better once she connected her iPod. The fear of the new of being alone and reliant upon herself faded in her immersion in the music. The excitement of this entirely new experience built inside her, and she couldn't wait to get to class, meet other people, and maybe sit under one of the overhanging willows and discuss life with pediatric boys growing their first beards. Humming she finished unpacking and folded down the boxes and slipped into her closet for later use. She lay on the bed, congratulating herself on the efficiency of thinking a ceiling could be used as a poster. Rock band or some cute actor? Someone knocked on her door, a tall, lanky dude, and stood in her door with the suggestion of a smile. She had a tattoo on the side of his neck, a symbol obscured by his hair. He had a paper in his hand and said, "Hi. Hey, I'm R.A., the resident advisor. Just popping in, saying hi." She stood and offered her hand. "I'm Olivia. Rick. So, here's some useful pamphlets. Maps of buildings for the classes. You should wander around tomorrow. Find where your classes are. This place is big. It also shows where the cafeteria is and on-campus pub. You old enough to drink? Probably not. First year, right? Yeah. A little booklet contains the rules of living here. There's a list of fines and whatnots. And the last one here is the phone number for campus security and all RAs. And it also has admin numbers, like who to talk to and what to do about changing classes. Okay, thanks. The cafeteria has a Starbucks now, and a Timmy's. They accept the meal plan cards. They're open late, too. Classes don't officially start until Tuesday, Monday. There's an orientation session on the go. It's more like a detailed version of the stuff I just gave you. Starts in the University Center around 9 in the morning. You'll get an event calendar for Frosh Week there, too. But you can get those anywhere. Perfect. Thanks again, Rick. No problem. See you around. Alright. He hustled off and she heard him knock on another door down the hall and began his speech. He sat on the bed and browsed through the pamphlets. The daylight faded and she noticed the sun shone mid-sky, outlining the buildings through the drawing of the black marker. Maybe she would go and walk now and browse the campus with a coffee in one hand and a cookie in the other. Early evening, summer warmth still lingering, it was pleasant. Besides, what else she would do? She needed to burn off all the energy rolling inside and buzzing under her skin. She would use her energy for an adventure. She slipped on her flip-flops, patted the pockets of her jean shorts, and made her way, had her keys, student card, and phone after closing the door behind her and using the map to orient herself. She headed to Starbucks, her flip-flops flapping on the ground. She passed by rooms with doors open, saw students lounging in their bed chairs. Bottles of alcohol lined up against the sentries on the desk. Half empty, half full, depending on your outlook. Some nodded, grinning through were part of the conspiracy, and others invited her in. Slurred speech indicating they already had too much. She smiled as some said, "Another time," to others, and left the building, to be met by fresh air, redolent of barbecues, roasting meat, and the sounds of laughter dancing in her ears. So busy there and cheerful. She glanced at the sky, rippled purple, and the dark bruise of the sun circled into the horizon. Maybe they have a nice September. Could never tell in Canada. Wasn't uncommon to have a plus 20 degrees Celsius one day and snowstorm the next. She loved the warmth and endured the weather. She hoped to have a warm autumn. Amazing to her to feel excited, scared, and hopeful at all the same time. Almost like when she got a driver's license. She bounced up and down in front of her dad and thought her heart would explode when she handed her the keys. Everything seemed impossible then, and it would same way now. A long road of possibilities stretched out in front of her. They walked down the path, winding its way through the thick trees, drooping branches laden with leaves, onto an open area where the home students threw football to each other and red plastic cups at their feet. Starbucks was a cafeteria area in the university center in the building. She got a latte and a gingerbread cookie. While sprinkling some cinnamon on her latte, she spied a familiar face seated at the table. It took her a moment to place him. Then she remembered she'd seen him many times over the years at the recreation center. She worked in high school. Big man, strong enough the shoulders, but always ready with a smile. It's like a little kid swam. He always sat at the pool reading a book and sipping a coffee. Much like now, what was he doing in Gulish? At the Starbucks on campus. What, did he have a kid going here? It seemed a bit too young. He shrugged it off and left the university center and continued on her exploration. The sun had disappeared behind the earth. The street lamps hummed above her, shining halos of light at her base, and darkness claimed the spaces in between. She didn't mind. She didn't learn to fear the dark. Main roads intersected throughout the campus. Olivia preferred to walk along the main roads because they were better lit. A logical precaution that in most instances made sense. Main roads were better lit and frequently traveled. Olivia's phone chirped. She took it out of her pocket and read a text from her friend, Sarah, wondering how the new digs were. Sarah was commuting from Hamilton to Western University in London and was jealous, in a good-natured way, of Olivia living away from home. With deft hands, Olivia texted back and forth with Sarah. She was unaware of the panel van slowing behind her. Later, by the text to Sarah and Olivia, police could determine the time of her abduction between 8:45 p.m. and 9 p.m. Olivia described the social R.A., Rick, to Sarah, and didn't hear the van creaking on the stop of the door sliding open. She was completely utterly oblivious to the large man in the gorilla mask coming up behind her until his arms encircled her. She saw the phone slip out of her hands and hit the sidewalk in slow motion, like when something terrible happened in a movie, so they slowed it right down for better witness the tragedy. She lifted it from her feet, carried to the van, and thrown inside. It happened so quick she befuddled her. She didn't start screaming until the door slid closed and the van circulated into the night. The snatch took approximately 3 seconds. Police later thought it was unusual there were no witnesses to Bearsy Road. Not unusual, just perfect timing, with a dash of bad luck for Olivia thrown in. She screamed and thrashed her legs, twisting in grip of the man in the gorilla mask. He punched her in the nose and stopped her screaming. The white spots twinkled behind her eyes. The backs of her head clanged against the metal floor. Her eyes teared and her mouth flooded with blood, and a salty taste slid past her tongue and down her throat. "That's a good little bitch. Keep fucking quiet," said the man. He turned her over and secured her hands behind her plastic thighs. She spat blood on the floor, confused, blinking her eyes and ridded them of light spots. The gorilla man flipped up on her back and placed his knees on the sides of her and sat on her stomach. He grunted with his weight, stretched the skin in her hip bones, and crushed her ribs against her insides. Her breath hitched in a difficult grasp. The driver didn't look back. He didn't glance in the direction at all, and she knew there'd be no help from him. Olivia guessed the broad-shouldered man would be driving a speed limit, stopping all the lights, following the rules of the road. They could not afford to be pulled over, not with her, their stolen cargo in the back. Gorilla Man had keys or something in his back pocket, because she felt something unyielding grind against her hip bone. The pain took on immensity in its own, and reduced her lesser pain to dim background noise. Her nose throbbed and blood still ran through her mouth, yet grinding pain in her hip overshadowed it. He grit her teeth and tried to move her hips a little, to adjust the angle of her hips to lessen the pain. She must have thought she were trying to buck him off because he had her nose and mouth pressing tight. The pain in her nose exploded, needles probing in her brain and hand tightened, fingers pinching her nostrils, closing, shutting her air off. She could see an outline of the mask was passing streetlights glowed on her fur. Her lungs burned. She twisted her head, trying to dislodge the hand. She responded by gripping tighter. The pain of this grip battled against her head and breathed. She opened her mouth and jerked her head to feel skin against her teeth. This skin, without thinking about it, knowing she had to breathe, needing air, needing a goddamn hand off her mouth. She clamped down the skin and crunching through it. Fuck. He lifted his hand and pulled sweet, beautiful air into her mouth. The air tasted wonderful and her lungs filled with it. She inhaled again and choked on the blood in her mouth, while the man in the grill mask examined his hand in passing lane of the street. The driver said a word. He picked up an iPod and pressed play, a woman's voice singing. Ave Maria issued from the speakers. She knew the song from her music teacher in high school. Her teacher, Miss Terrain, used to play it all the time and tilt her head, listening to it, and her eyes closed. The driver didn't look back, unconcerned about the partner swearing for why he did. The gorilla got off her and knelt beside her. At this moment, the removal of his weight equated to heaven. She leaned over her, and even though she couldn't see his eyes as the depth of his mask, she felt him roaming up and down her body. Olivia pressed her body on the floor of the van, desperate to create distance, maybe disappear on the metal floor. He grabbed her nose in between his thumb and index finger and squeezed. He squealed and tasted blood dribbling in her mouth. The pain lifted up her hip off the floor. Then he let go, chuckling. The lights of the suite ran across the ceiling, his head dark, furry blob. You and I? We're gonna have some fun, aren't we, darling? You got spunk, I like it. Her voice trembled. Do what you like, just please let me go. I haven't seen your faces, please let me go. He didn't move. The van rocked gently. He ran his fingers slightly over her cheeks, almost a caress. He flinched and couldn't suppress a shudder. His hand snapped out and grabbed her breast and twisted it, pulling her off the floor with his strength. She tried out, and after what seemed like a lifetime of pain, he let go. He said, I'll do what I like anyways, but letting you go? Doesn't matter how nice you play or how great you suck a dick. We're never letting you go. You're ours now, and baby, we're gonna have us some fun tonight. Have a break you in, honey. Take that fight right out of you. That's the best part, breaking the new ones in. Woo-hee. The ceiling of the van blurred in her tears. Whatever they had in store for her wasn't going to be pleasant. And no matter what she did in the end, she knew they would have to kill her. Why wouldn't they? The dead make terrible witnesses. It was clear that what he had said. He wasn't her first victim. They weren't bumbling fools. They had gone through this before and acted with confidence because of it. How many girls had perished under their cruel hands? Their veins ran cold with despair. Before the van stopped, a gorilla man put a sack over her head and tied it around her neck. Taut enough to be uncomfortable, her hands throbbed from the tightness of the plastic cuffs. She lifted her up and slung her over the shoulder with a grunt. A blood clump fell out of her swollen nose and ran along her skin into her hair. From the van, it seemed a short distance before the sound of boots on gravel turned the click of tile. She wished she could see the inside of the house. They were where they were and what they were doing. Blood burst in her head, and this shoulder digging into her diaphragm made it hard to breathe. Her stomach roiled, and she thought she might vomit in the sack. No, don't do that, she thought, clenching her teeth and swallowed down the rising bile, not wanting to have her own head face swimming in her own puke. Doctor creaked in a heavy feet the wooden stairs. She could tell they were descending because each step dipped down. The stairs went on forever, each drop a fresh dig into her stomach. Her knee cracked on the corner of something's heart and she yelped. She felt the blood clot roll against her cheek. It was cold. Shut up, that was nothing. You don't know what pain is. Her will has been reduced to sounds and rattling the urge to vomit. She heard a clinking of metal and the door scraped open. The steps flooded forward. She let her slide off his shoulder and she knew he was going to drop her like the sack. She managed to turn her body before she hit cold concrete. Her right shoulder, the hipmost impact of the expulsion of hair, hissed through her lips. Her hip and shoulder throbbed, pulses of pain in a universe of pain. The plastic ties on her wrists bit into the flesh when she hit the floor and a warm trickle of blood slid along her trembling thumbs and palm. Her head clipped to the ground and her teeth clacked together. Winded, she curled to the ground, waiting for the pain to subside. Steps receded and the heavy door clanged shut. The rope around her neck dug in, cutting off the corridor and dimming her vision until she lifted her head in relief. Hold still, honey, I gotta cut the string. You won't want me to nick you. Metal pressed against her ear, down her jawline, playing along with the patient pressure. The string cut with ease. She yanked the sack off her head, getting a few hairs being grabbed, and she gritted her teeth against it, wondering how many hairs she had gotten to grab. Bright light strung in her eyes. She blinked and sniffed back blood leaking from her nose. She moved to wipe it away, but her hands didn't comply. She felt the numbing sensation moving up her forearms, an intense tingling, like a buzzing under her skin. She read one time a lack of oxygenated blood kills cells. How do they help keep her trussed up long enough for her hands to become useless? Now that they were going to do with her, nothing pleasant, nothing but she'd laugh and blush about, that's for sure. Something terrible, something cruel she was about to get snatched and hidden, so they could enjoy their prize and do things to her where you wouldn't expect no help. Her screams wouldn't matter, except those who caused them. Her head flicked around the room, cinder block walls like her dorm room, except pink. Pepto-Bismol eyes stinging sort of pink. The floor was concrete gray, a pink metal dresser against the wall. She later learned the dresser was bolted to the floor. Like everything in the room, the bolts were melted in the seam, impossible to remove. Her eyes looked like an open in a shower, and a pink tiles and a heart-shaped mat outside the stall of the floor. And next to the stall, a pink fucking toilet. And behind her, she had a crane in her neck to see, a cot frame painted pink, bolted to the floor, covered in pink blankets and red pillows. The blue room measured 2, maybe 3 times bigger than when she moved into the university, which seemed now a lifetime ago. The grill man squatted before her. Welcome home. Another man stood in the corner, wearing a jackal mask. Must be the driver, the one who didn't speak and turned to look all the way there. Wherever he was, his arms crossed over his chest, and he had broad shoulders and the muscles ripped around his forearm. The dark pockets of his eyes devoured her. The girl man stood unbuckling his belt, casual, as though he were getting to climb into bed after a hard day. Nice place, isn't it? Warm. He gestured to the toilet shower. Private amenities. He tossed the belt behind him and started kicking off his boots. And best of all, rent-free. He slid his pants down and an erection bounced above her. Well, not really free. You have to pay in some way, I suppose. Sometimes paying can be painful. Yep, it sure be. How painful it gets is completely up to you. Well, it's kind of mostly up to you. You're misbehave. I'm not accountable for my actions. Sometimes I just get carried away. All of a sudden, I'm covered in blood. My poor date? Well, she barely looks human anymore. And for what? I'm gonna get what I'm gonna want in the end anyways. I always do. He grabbed her shorts, fumbling the button, and she scrambled, and kicked out her foot. He caught her effortlessly. He bucked and twisted and kicked out, trying to get loose of him. He held on, his grip tightening, and he said, "You're gonna want to play nice?" He broke over his shoulder, and the jackal. A little help here? The jackal walked over. Olivia could see the bulge in Jackal's pants and knew where no help from him. She knew he would just listen to him. Give in. Give them what they wanted. And maybe, just maybe, she could figure a way to get out of there, and she couldn't. She didn't amaze her and quit like that. Couldn't give in to these fuckers. Amazing how similar terror and rage were Olivia. Rage made her forget about all the shoulders hurt now, how her hands tingled for lack of blood flow. Olivia thought, F them. Think they can just scoop her off of the street and be their plaything for nothing? Everything has a cost and they were going to pay it. Her nose didn't bother her at the moment the jackal grabbed her feet and the gorilla started tearing through her shorts. Instead, she screamed and pierced screamed, whirling a pitch and echoing a small room. She kicked and twisted, squirmed and screamed and snarling and fight them. Gorilla Man grabbed a fistful of her hair and punched her in the face. Her lips smashed against her teeth and hit her floor again. The ceiling spun, the long tubes of light fading in and out. She tried to scream and instead choked to blood. Coughs racked her chest and spit out blood into the gray floor. I like this one. I really do, but she's gotta learn. When you do, shears you. Good. Now hold her tight. She's not gonna like this. Still dazed, the word shears reached a part of her brain telling her she could be concerned. She lifted his head, frowned in what she saw. The jackal sat on one of her legs and held the other by the ankle. His grip tight, his biceps bulging. The gorilla held shears, garden shears, the type he'd seen her dad use to cut thick branches. She had brand name on the blade, Craftsman, and knew he brought them with Canadian Tire, the same place her dad brought out his tools. She whispered, "Hey now, hey, what's going?" The shears snipped cleanly through her small toe. The toe jumped into the air, spun and hit the cold door. Dash of blood punctured where he landed, a red blot and gray. What the hell just happened? She couldn't believe it. Was that her toe? The pain hit. They cut off her toe, right, and instead of screaming, she yelled, "You motherfuckers, cocksucking shitbags. Let me go, I swear to." The gorilla squished her cheeks in his hand, fingers digging deep. Her jaw creaked under the grinding pressure. It cut short her cries. He said, "Shut the fuck up." The shook her head, and she could feel the grinding pressure to the bones in her skull. She leaned in close and said, "You want me to keep going? You want me to whittle down every toe? Then what? Start with your fingers? After that, an arm? Is that what you want?" She shook her head, her courage faltering under her images he presented. "I'm going to cut those ties off your wrists. Then you're going to take off your own fucking clothes and lie down in bed. My partner took the time to make all nice and pretty. I don't want no more from you. Not one fucking word and whining or please don't crap. Got it? No one more sound out of you and you're going to lose another baby toe. We understand each other, princess?" She nodded. He held the shears up to her eyes and clipped them shut. She flinched. He turned her roughly to his shoulder and snipped through the plastic ties. Blood rushed into her hands. Single life fluttered in her fingers. Another location of pain Brody whacked it. Blood dribbled from where her toe had been. He ached. Intermediate shards of pain made her wince and stuck in the air. She saw her disembodied toe on the floor and metal leg of the bed. She painted the toenail a bright blue. She thought it was cute at the time. She stood, being careful to be easy to the foot, snot, drool, and tears shiny line hanging from her chin. Under the gaze of the gorilla and jackal, she undressed, her entire body trembling, toe in the floor kept drawing her eye, as though tethered to a line. She then pulled her shorts off with a fabric brush against the red nub where her toe used to be. She sucked in air and she almost fell over. Stumbled and she stifled a sob. Now to fight men such as these. They whittled her down piece by piece. In the end, they would be left. A torso, maybe? They would need a room to hold her. They would just need a box. They were going to do what they wanted where there was nothing she could do about it. Tears shined her cheeks fully nude. She hobbled to the bed and sunk into it, staring at the ceiling, wishing there was anything else anyone else. The girl sighed, rubbed her hands together and said, "My, that sure is pretty." The bed creaked under his weight. 4. 5 years. Although she'd lost more parts of herself over time, the first night remained the worst. Maybe because such cruelty was undone her before she questioned whether it was really happening, even though it kept happening over and over. Those things happen only in those horror movies. Dale tried to get her to watch, but she never would. She wasn't into that sort of thing. She told him once that the world didn't need more horrors, even if it entertainment. She didn't know anything, the real horror, and then spoke of it in a protected person's perspective, confident those terrors would never visit her in her bedroom home, and a full belly of clothes on her back. Now she lived close to those terrors. She became a meat puppet, her strings played by two masked men, evil in their own ways. Quite a contrast between the two men. The gorilla enjoyed giving pain. The more she squealed, the more excited he became. One time while he was using her, he stabbed her shoulder with a knife. She imagined she heard the skin split as it slid into the ground against the bone. Now, oh, how that hurt, and how she bled. She freaked out, squirming, kicking, screaming, and the gorilla man yelling, "Fuck yeah, I love goddamn Bronco." The jackal barely touched her. He would always be in the room, though. They always came to her cell together. They always wearing the mask. The jackal never spoke to her, not once. Afterwards, when the gorilla man got too enthusiastic, the jackal would carry her to the shower, clean her wounds, dress her in a fluffy robe, and comb for her, never saying a word. The dark eyes behind the mask enigmatic, and more than once she hoped to find some humanity in the depths. There never was. He would play Anna Maria on his iPod, attached to the portable speakers to repeat the same fucking song over and over. He would paint her toenails pink. That's how he had left anyways. Resting her foot on his knee, always gentle and relaxed. He would clean her room with some sort of polish, mop the floors, and spray the room freshener before they left. He liked the scent of lavender. The gorilla man would snore on her bed for a weight, pacing the room, anxious for the jackal to finish the administration for his labor. It was the jackal who would show up after one of their date nights and make sure he took a morning after pill. The gorilla man sighing theatrically in the background. No need to threaten or force her to take a pill. She didn't even want a child by rape. The jackal proved uncruciable. She didn't know what he got from all this. He never used her, not that way. The jackal watched moving from the room at better angles, an almost forgotten shadow seen over the gorilla man's shoulder. She thought maybe, just maybe, he felt sorry for her, and there was some connection she could make to prevent him from participating. Maybe he cared for her. He wanted to believe it. She wanted to think she would become an ally. After a brief time, she dismissed the idea. He never shrieked from helping Gorilla Man punish her. The sense he even liked it. She got right in there, and he would bear his breathing get faster, and he held down for the gorilla. At first, he thought every time he entered the room, he once moved the shower curtain rod, hid behind the door, and the gorilla's giant head appeared beyond the door. He struck it, grinding her teeth and screaming. Her arm was a restless burr. Problem was, the rod had been hollow, a lightweight piece of shit aluminum. The gorilla man laughed at her, his arms crossed above his mask and his eyes peering out for protection of his forearms. Then he took the rod from her hands like it were nothing, like she were nothing. And then he punished her, laughing sometimes and other times, his voice growing rage. The jackal stood by to clean up after her. The jackal was there to watch. Over the years she examined every inch of the room. Everything had been bolted down. There was nothing sharp in the room. The corners of dresses were rounded. It had been built designed for soft edges. A mirror made of hardened plastic would not break. They had suspected pink curtains on the wall, nothing behind it. Certainly no window, just more cinder block pink. It was a decorative curtain, suspended by string. She considered choking someone with it, but they were never alone, and to think she would overpower even one of them with the string wrapped around their neck seemed a ludicrous idea. Even if she managed to somehow get the string wrapped around the neck, the flimsy thing would probably snap in the slightest pressure, and she remembered what happened after she tried to ambush him with the curtain rod. There was nothing she could do. After some time, believing in the horror had become her life, she didn't want to keep on living. For what? To be the six-man's plaything? Getting worded down and she's dissatisfied or angered in some way? What would be left at her in the end? A torso? Helpless in bed, unable to defend herself in any way? What would her life be like? She fought for the sake of fighting. She couldn't stop herself. When they walked in, expected to take it from her, she shook with anger. She should make it as easy for them. After a time, the uselessness of her actions took a toll on her. All she ever got her efforts was punishment, more pain, more degradations. She never got out of the tiny cell, had even beyond the door, so she wouldn't fight, wouldn't get hurt. The girl would rape her, and then, after her wounds were tended to, they would leave. If she didn't fight them, she would be raped. If she did, it would be hurt, maybe get her nose cut off, and still raped. What was the point? They made it clear that she was no longer had control over her life. Her life belonged to them. They could make it any time. Before they did, though, they would make it hurt. They were masters of pain. She wanted to die. It was one decision left to her. One she would contribute to. At least one thing she had control over. How could she get it done? There was nothing lethal in her room to do anything to herself with. Instead, she made the decision to do nothing. She would starve herself. She wouldn't eat any foods they gave her. It was hard at the beginning. Her stomach rumbled and complained, and she ignored it by sleeping, turning her back to the plate of food and dresses and calling for its smell. She thought of it flushing down the toilet, but she didn't trust herself. They would get too close to the pancakes, eggs, or whatever else they made for her. Two men would come into the room, look at the untouched plate, and remove it. Sometimes the girl would chuckle and say something like, "How's the hunger strike going?" Or, "Don't get too skinny, I may not want you then, and wouldn't that be a shame?" He felt herself shutting down, despondent and indifferent to everything, living in her mind. She moved to use the toilet, and the water in the bowl tempted her. She was so thirsty, and look at all that water, right there, in the bowl after her, and all she would do is dip her head in and lap it up. The sink didn't tempt her near as much. She would have to turn on the tap to see the water, and the toilet it didn't hide. She was right there, and she was surprised that the water had a smell. Now the chlorine pool she would smell at quite a distance, but she never considered water out of the tap or toilet as sent to it. The longer she didn't drink, the stronger the smell became. She ignored it, and letting the thirst build and hunger carve out a hollow hole inside her. She felt her energy sliding away. Weakness allowed her to ignore the hunger and thirst. Well, to a certain extent. So to keep it at bay, to force herself not to give in, she slept and she wouldn't want to sleep and traveled her own mind. She stopped using the toilet. She went to her bed, although she was amazed at anything coming out of her since she stopped having her body anything that would create waste. Maybe it was her own body eating herself to give her energy, and the waste was dead parts inside getting out. It didn't matter. In her mind, she was already dead. Hours passed in a slow grinding fog. She developed skin burns from urine and crap, and although the parts of her disgusted, it was a smart part of no real voice. That annoying voice would overcome her lack of nutrient-induced lethargy. They hoped to eventually blend into the background so they'd forget about her, melt into the sheets on the bed, and disappear into painless oblivion. A place where cool men couldn't take her apart piece by piece. Stupid, but at the same time it wasn't. To her it was a way to escape them without having to physically escape, and face punishment. She pictured them coming into her room, their masks twitching, there in a panic, and they couldn't find her, even though they lay right on the bed, giggling into her pillow. Or more accurately, the pig giggled because she fused with it. She believed in the idea way a young child believes in Santa Claus, a belief sustained by faith and hope. Like all their hopes since she had been in prison, they were shattered in careless ease. The grill and Jackal creaked open the door, and the grill said, "What the fuck's that smell? Did she her bed? What is that? What is that? What is this? Jesus." He stomped over her, then kneeled before her, her dark, angry eyes boring into her, and she knew he saw her, and it saw her illusion, not real. It didn't disappear at all. Stupid, stupid girl, she cried. You better fucking cry. What is this? Do you think you're doing here? Not eating and now shitting on your goddamn bed? This is not a hospice. When you're no use to me, you'll be hacked up and hung in my freezer. I'll toss your fucking guts into the woods for animals to eat, and then I'll cook you on a skillet with extra virgin olive oil and some spices, maybe with a bottle of white. Then I have a bit of your meat besides mashed potatoes and carrots on my plate. I think of all the good times I had with you. God, that sounds good. You know what? That idea is making me hungry. He canted on his head, sort of Jackal, and said, "You hungry for that, Jackal?" No answer came from the Jackal. He never answered anything. Gorilla stood and glared down at her. He waved his arm at her. "This, whatever it is you're doing, doesn't make you useful to me. It makes you more work. I got enough to do as it is, and I don't want any more. Now this has got to stop. You're going to clean yourself up and eat the fucking food I take the time to cook for you." The razor blade, the old-fashioned kind of the handle, danced before her eyes. "Or I start using this. I'll cut off your fucking nose. Then I'll pop it in my mouth and eat it in front of you. And honey, you know I will." He ran the back of his blade down the bridge of her nose. He shivered. Her gaze shifted to the Jackal. There must be pleading in her look because Gorilla chuckled and said, "You're looking for a wrong place for help, girlie. There's no help for you here. Not in this place." The truth of those words gutted her. The Jackal stood against the wall, his arms crossed over his chest. Even if she couldn't see his face, the posture of description is indifference. No hope for her from him. So why try to live? To be raped, left alone to heal, and then raped some more? Death would be a blessing. It would be merciful, and for the considering the alternative. She hoped that sometime the Jackal would help her. He had looked after her, after she bled from orifices, legs trembling too weak to stand. He helped her to shower with great care. He applied ointment. He gave her pain medication to never ever try to fuck with her. He'd been gentle every time, taking care to clean the wounds with a light touch, and whenever he hissed in pain, he paused until the pain subsided. Why would it be like that if he did it in some fucking crazy psycho man way to care for her? There was no reason for it. He had hoped to seduce him into friendship, help her get out of here, and he realized how foolish that idea had been. It would be part of a Jackal's whole fantasy to care for a damsel worldly wounded, even if it had been him, or that did a wounding in the first place. They never visited her alone. They were careful, and in many reasons safety a primary one. What if by some miracle, up there with Moses parting of the Red Sea type of miracle, she did get an upper hand on one of them? She might escape and say, by coming alone, one of them actually developed real feelings for her, got to see her and know her out of the rape context and saw her as an actual person and not a personal Barbie doll. But they never came in alone, did they? Their policy of always visiting together had a purpose, a clever one, to prevent feelings from building, to diminish the possibility of her getting the better of one of them. There'd be no escape. There'd be no help. It was meant to discourage hope. It worked. She turned her head away, expecting her cold razor against her neck before the burning pain of the slice bore into nothingness. A part of her hoped it did. She didn't cut her neck. The girl cut a knee into her side and leaned in, pinning her to the bed. She pinched her nose and thought, he's going to do it. He's going to cut off my nose. Then he let go. Her nose had pulled her right ear so hard it hurt. Then razor cut into it. He saw it and cut off her right ear. And now she screamed and bucked. Her legs kicked out, her arms pressed against the legs and punched at his sides. Nothing stopped the sawing motion or feeling of blood flowing from her ear, to the sound of her tearing flesh as she pulled and sawed. At the back of the room, as always, the jackal watched. Afterwards, the jackal carried on her shower, her trembling legs too weak to sustain her. Blood ran down her shoulder, back, and legs. So much blood. She wanted to touch where her ear had been, to make sure it had happened. It throbbed with pain, and her ear even heard it. And she didn't want to know for sure. Not really. Else she could be real, can it? Abysmal cruelty swallowed in her despair. The jackal with gentle hands cleaned her, bandaged her, and combed her out her long hair. Gorilla Man changed her sheets, complaining that swearing the entire time. He muttered himself, I got carried away again, didn't I? How was I supposed to clean this shit up when I cut off her ear? I suppose we'll get a new mattress and sheets, and I'll have to go get it as usual. The jackal bandaged her head over the spot the ear had been. They sat her in a chair, left the room with the mattress and sheets, and returned the new ones a short time later. They must have stashed her stuff somewhere, or when their charges mess up, or when they mess up their changers. After the mattress was down and the clean sheets were put in the bed, the grill raped her. Then they were making a point. It had been always get worse. They educated her on that. When she earned her PhD in the theory of how things can always get worse, her life consisted of one became regular routine of irregular rape and torture. What she did do, though, after the gorilla took her ear, was eat the food they brought her and shower in almost constant irregularity. She never knew when they would show up, so there was no schedule she could figure out. Her aches would disappear. She would have 3 or 4 books they left for her in the moments. She could imagine she were at home and her dad downstairs surrounded by books and awaiting a phone call from a friend, peaceful and quiet. Then the door would creak open and 2 masked men would enter to damage her for her own amusement and destroy any illusion she had built in her mind. Time passed, marked by different depravity, a unique dignity she would be forced to suffer. Usually that fucking Ava Maria song playing in the background, a soundtrack to her captivity. She would have been cured of suicide. A sharp razor took care of that. She had been cured of depression. A dark cloud hovered over her. Sometimes she would think of her dad. She would cry until her stomach cramped and her eyes burned. Other times she sat in a reading chair, opened a book, and hours would pass without a page turned and read. She lost hours in haze. Her neck, arms, and legs would groan from the sudden movement and startling awake. She wouldn't kill herself. She wasn't because she harbored hope of escape. It was because she feared the lessons if she failed. She had lost 3 toes, 2 fingers, and an ear. They told her the next time she would lose her leg, and Gorilla Man promised he would feed it to her. After all he had been through, he believed him. Chapter 5. They always entered the room together, the Gorilla Man first and then the Jackal. She would hear the deadbolt turn and the squeal of the hinges as the door pushed open, a heavy door displacing the air before it, and there would be a breeze on their face. The Gorilla Man would offer a greeting in a happy tone, as though he was asking how your vacation had been, and put in words belied of a joviality of the voice. Your snatch. Ready for another round, is it? He would put his key in the pocket and take off his clothes, folding them neatly and placing them on the floor. Strong shoulders and broad chest suggested an athletic youth. The years added girth to his waist, and even though he couldn't lose a few pounds, he was fast. With his giant's hands, he would reach for her, pinching her in a sensitive spot to make her cringe and squeal. It would have been the way since the first night, a routine she could count on. And that's why they treated her prize. That when the door opened announcing its intention to admit her tormentors, she pulled the blankets up in her chin, even though she knew it would not protect her. Reflexive reaction of fear developed in childhood, hoping a blanket would hide her from a red-eyed monster breathing in her closet. A shiver coursed through her and her grit her teeth against it. Olivia prepared her mind. She had healed nicely, physically at least, from the last time he felt anger, and she would be messed up again. Anger felt better than fear, even though they constantly thought of assistance within her. They getting hurt and then healing just for them to come along and hurt her some more from getting to be tired of fucking routine. Split lips were the worst because they were hard to eat. Everything stung, especially when she would be chewing along, mind on something else. Then she would crunch into a scab inside her mouth, pulling it open again. That hurt a lot. Her mouth would fill with salty blood, and mixing with the food in combination made her want to gag. She told herself this time, just maybe, he might be gentle. He might be nice. Illusions and lies were all she had left to indulge in, like she did when she read and imagined herself back home. She wasn't back home. She constructed the illusions expertly. The door changed shut. The dog clicked. The Gorilla Man stood alone. No Jackal. The blankets dropped from her hands. Her mouth hung open so wide the bird could have fallen in it. Time for a private session, my love. I've had enough of holding back. Holding back? Was he fucking serious? He unbuttoned his shirt, folded it, and placed it in a dresser. Never liked an audience. His fucking rules, though. Do this and don't do that. A man could get tired of that shit. Olivia had no idea what to say, or even if he could even say anything. He looked agitated, nervous. She wondered if he had killed the Jackal, but dismissed the idea. Somehow she knew the Jackal was the dangerous one, the one to come out on top if they ever had it out. She kicked off his shoes, dropped his pants, folded them, and slid off his boxers, put them in a pile. He didn't take off his socks. He never did. Probably because the floor was always cold. His penis hung limp, also out of the ordinary. Maybe he didn't feel as brave as he pretended. He stepped forward in her bed. He pressed himself back. His penis stiffened. You know what? I hate this fucking mask. I can barely see. Fuck this thing. He unlaced the back of the mask and tore it off his head. Oh, fuck, he's gonna kill me now. Countless times over the years, Olivia prayed for death, and now, faced with the certainty of it, he thought he didn't want it. Why else would he take off his mask? The night long ago, when she had taken, even though they were told her but never let her go, a small part of her believed otherwise. Of course she did. What life wouldn't a spark of hope? Bearing a mask helped to sustain the hope. If she ever escaped, why bother wearing the mask all the time? With the mask on, escape was even more ridiculous. Release was a possibility. Another constructed lie, sure. She fluctuated between wanting to believe and thinking it foolish to do so. Then the mask dropped to the ground, terror squeezed out her scream. A sharp bark, widow-pitched hysteria. He pointed a finger at her, dark eyes lacing. Shut up, bitch. Spittle gathered the corner of his mouth. The girl was scared. It didn't even make sense. Yet she knew it would be true. He knew he was breaking the rules and feared the jackal. The first time without a mask made a huge difference. The mask infused them with inhuman quality. Monsters unreal. This face inhumanized them. It's still a monster, but terrible because they've had a nightmare, all more tangible. Dark hair, dark eyes. Someone she might have considered in a different situation, middle-aged, handsome. Now the mask on the floor was all she could focus on. The rubber hairy gorilla mask I had hated all this time. It caused so many nightmares and real-life horrors. Discarded on the ground because now was the time for her to die. No more fucking around. After a bout of raping, beating, and maybe, if he was feeling frisky, some digital amputation, maybe her nose this time, or her lips. A bloody gash in his mouth is all he would leave her. Then she would cut her throat. He saved her on their beds, pointing at the mask, begged, please put that on. You have to. He stopped. A confused eyebrow climbed his forehead. His face bloated red. Knew she thought he was insulting him. And then putting him on the mask was hide his ugly face, and she wanted to tell him that wasn't the reason. And she opened her mouth to say it, and instead a fist connected with her forehead, and sealing indulted the spun in time passing his flashes. He grunted above her. He tasted blood in her mouth, back to the wiggle to gum. Her breast hurt and being dampness there. Slick on her stomach, a slapping sound with every thrust. Was he sweating on her? The bed kept creaking. He buried his head in the pillow above her shoulder and kept going. He must have been hitting her after the first punch. He must have blacked out. It didn't worry her. It hadn't happened before. Her breast hurt. What did he do to it? Her vision cleared. It would see lights, recesses in the ceiling behind an unspeakable plastic. A collection of dead flies pulled on the bottom. A vein jumped on his neck, next to her cheek. As he clenched her legs around him, he moaned, surprised. He ran her hands through his hair. He tried to lift his head, but he held it down. Firmly, he responded by moving faster and moaning some more. He focused on the vein in his neck, pulsing under his skin. Jumping fast, she put her mouth in the vein and he paused, maybe sensing the danger. He bit into his neck, ground the teeth together until they met, and screamed and tried to stand under the bed. Made it awkward for him to get his feet under him, and all he could manage to do was his knees and his butt on his heels. Entwined it upright, he locked her legs around him, squeezed his head to her, and she ground her teeth into his skin. Blood spurted into her mouth and jetted down her throat. She gagged on him and couldn't release her hold on him. She held his head to her shoulder, keeping him close to his arm. Her legs tightened on him. He jerked up and clung to him. Warm blood, almost hot, ran between them. Effing bitch, she growled. He snaked his arms in between them, and Olivia could feel his hands on her stomach, moving up to her chest. She pushed on his hands and pulled with his back. She strained to hold them, and she meant to her death. She could feel them separating, despite her straining to hold them together, her muscles tight with tension. His hands slid along her skin, slick from blood. She couldn't hold him much longer. With a tedious heave, he pushed her down. His strength pulled her hands from his head and reared up to the wet, slipping sound. Her teeth gripped a chunk of his neck and reeled back. A flap of skin stayed with her. A wound pulsed an arc of blood across the room. It splashed the pink tile of the shower. His mouth opened with an O. His eyes bulged for a satisfying second. In time, she saw panic in him. Honest to God, got himself type of panic. With a mouthful of his meat, blood bibbing in her chest, she smiled and spat the excised meat on the pillow. She clamped his left hand on his neck and made ready to step off the bed until she saw her smile. He turned back and struck her with a hammer fist. Used to his rages, he saw it coming and raised a forearm to block it. His fist crashed through her hand and bent her index finger back. He heard it crack before, and a pain hit her as his fist sank into her stomach. The air whooshed out of her, and she curled into a ball, holding her injured hand against her chest. She gasped. He lifted her arm to strike her again, and he weaved drunkenly, eyes rolling into his head before he bring him down to focus. He grunted, stumbled, and almost fell to the floor. Blood covered the left side of his body, all the way down to his feet. He staggered, righted himself, and took attentive steps to his clothes. His chest heaved, his legs shook, like a toddler taking his first steps. To Olivia, he looked drunk. The hole he exercised in her neck was too big, and she couldn't stop the blood from running out. He seemed incredible to her that he might die here. He didn't have any thought of die, although she hoped for it, and all her heart on many occasions. To see him stumbling, then going down to a knee, his hand falling to his wound, a gush of blood hitting her dresser. She kept on the bed, her tingling finger forgotten. He swayed on one knee and then fell flat on the floor, his head striking the concrete. It made a thunk sound, dropping a coconut on the floor. His room was suffocated in the scent of blood, coffee and cloying. Olivia crept closer. Was he dead? Did he hear hope? He cradled her injured hand with his stomach and moved closer. Small spurts of blood drooled from his neck wound. His socks remained straightly white, considering all the blood. He edged closer to him and tiptoes, afraid she might wake him. Did a finger twitch? Could she rise and fall back? Was he still breathing? He nudged him with her toe. He groaned and he jumped back. Takes a long time for someone to die. He didn't move. His flesh to white and porcine, splattered in blood and white socks, inert the concrete floor, lying in spread pool of blood. He didn't look real, and none of this seemed real until the blood touched her toes, warm and then cool, so quick to lose its warmth. The blood oozed out and stopped altogether. Fucking must be dead. He felt numb, dazed. Everything looked great in detail. She could see the pores in his shoulder, individual hair sticking up. His sagging middle age as appeared sunken, and for once in miserable time spent there, he didn't feel afraid of him, because he was dead, disgusting piece of shit rapist, torturer. She had hated him. He hit him with her healthy hand, punched him right in the back, and the impact sent ripples through his flesh. She stood and stomped on the head. She hated him through hate and an inadequate word for what she felt for him. There was no word to describe the depths of her abhorrence for him. She wanted to crush his head into the ground. She hauled her foot back, aiming for his head, and connected all right, and bent her toes back, and stretched her tendons running along the top of her foot. Her other foot slipped in the blood, and she fell back, putting her hands out, and her injured fingers struck on the floor. With her hand, the pain was like a lightning under her skin. She yelped and cursed under her breath. She crawled out of the blood, eyes blinded with tears, and wondering if she could have that up even more. Now her foot and hand ached, and she was sitting in a room, cold and corpse. It was still stuck right where she was, before suffering new injuries she caused, while the pain receded in sharp stabs in an ebbing pulse. He glanced around the prison. So much blood. Glaring in contrast to dark red and bright pink, some of the blood appeared back. She stood, struggling to get her feet under her, and waved above the dead man. Naked, she felt vulnerable. He glimpsed through the dresser and struggled into her underwear, wincing, pulled a tank top over her head, and at the closet selected 2 items of clothing they allowed her, track pants and a sweatshirt. No strings of any of them. If they wanted her to do something nice, they brought it to them and wanted her to put it on under her delicate gazes. The gorilla man would rub a hand along his crotch, watching her. Now she fucking hated him, both of them. Once dressed, she noticed a salty taste of blood in her mouth. Knowing it was his blood almost made her gag. She wanted nothing of him on her or near her. He revolted her. He hurried to the sink and sucked back of water, swishing it around, trying to keep a nagging thought of the jackal would do to her if he returned to that moment and find a companion dead on the floor. Everything had been bolted down, no weapons for her to help her. She was stuck there, and her hands placed as she tried to wipe the blood off around her mouth. She thought of the jackal return and quivered her stomach. She had to get out before she had returned. How to do that now if she couldn't do it before? The key. When the gorilla came into the room, she watched him put a key into a prison in his pocket. That's what he always did. He gasped, seeing his pants in a neat pile of the dresser. She would get out of there, and with some luck, and by God, it would be about time she had come. She would come out of here before the jackal returned. Leaving the faucet running, she hobbled where she folded the clothes, her foot throbbing with every step. She tossed the clothes on the floor in her scramble to get his pants. She saw him with a key in his pocket. She knew it, yet still a nagging fear persisted. What if it wasn't there? After all this time, escape would be as close as could it? He felt a hard outline of the keys through her pocket, and her heart tugged at the arteries of her chest. She dug her hand inside and pulled them out. She held them up with her blurring eyes, perfectly aware of her missing middle finger and the middle knuckle up. She used her thumb and ring finger to hold the keys. They would be taking her index finger, too, from the same right hand. The smooth pink end grotesque to her. Her lip quivered. They hadn't taken much from her. She inhaled and pushed down the sadness. Time to get out of there. They stepped over the grill man, fumbled through the keys, and her concentration was down a narrow point. Handful of keys on the ring. Which could open the door. She tried 3, 4, no luck. What was the jackal pulling in the driveway right now? And she stood there, missing with the keys. A key slipped in and turned. She exhaled a deep breath and shuddered with her breast. She pulled a door open. For the first time in 5 years, she left her prison. Wooden stairs in front of her led up to another door. A hallway extended her left and right. Narrow, the hallway walls were painted white with a dim bulbous ceiling. There were 3 doors on her left and 1 to her right. Heavy metal doors painted pink, just like her room. There were women like her down here, toys for her to be demented. How is this even possible? She she should go. Right now. Go help and return. A smart thing to do. It wasn't equipped for a rescue mission. She took a step towards the wooden stairs and paused, her foot in the air. Then, as if the jackal returned to her absence and decided to get rid of the rest of them. Could she live with herself knowing she could have saved them? The rooms were probably empty, though. How many people would you abduct and not be found out? Maybe they were just supply rooms, and she would get the fuck out of there while she still could. Lying to herself again, the rooms weren't empty, and she knew it. There were others like her, abused and tortured, waiting for an escape. That might never come. Olivia had to do something. Either way, she could at least check. She held up a key ring and jangled for her eyes. A lot of keys here. She moved to a door on the right, listening intently for any sign of movement from upstairs. What could she do if she heard the front door open and heavy threads of the boards above? Probably have a fucking heart attack, that's what. Whatever happened, there was no way she was gonna go back into the room. No goddamn way in hell. She clearly slipped on the first try. He pushed the door open and faced a room identical to the one she left. A young woman sat in the bed, clad track pants and a sweatshirt, like the one she wore. Probably an ideal in bulk. The Siffkers. She pictured them in pushing a cart around Costco, wearing a mask, holding up clothing, and nodding as they tossed it in the cart. The girl hugged her knees. Terrified eyes peered through the strands of her hair. Olivia thought she could be looking in a mirror. She resembled her so much, except for a quick glance. Olivia noticed the woman wasn't missing any fingers or toes. The girl lifted her head and raised eyebrows, confusion and hope wearing in her eyes. Olivia said, "Let's get out of here. We gotta go." "Who are you?" "Someone like you. Someone who gets the fuck out of here." The girl bounced off the bed and reached Olivia in an instant. She appeared healthy and strong. Olivia thought she must know the addition here. She would have worked down and look. Olivia said, "There are more doors this way." They moved down the hall. Olivia's hand shook at the door. The keys rattled in her hands. Fear and pain exhausted her, making her movements clumsy. A girl put her hands on Olivia, steadying them, and said, "Here, let me do it." Olivia let go of the keys. "I'm Lucy." "Olivia." Lucy opened the door in a second try. Another pink room. Another prisoner in bed. Startlingly similar to Olivia and Lucy, except this one appeared lifeless as a mannequin. Her eyes followed them, and they entered the room. Despondency showed in her gaze. She didn't have any clothes on, and it didn't seem to bother her. He didn't try to cover herself up. Books were scattered on the floor. The rest of the room appeared neat. Lucy said, "Oh my God, her hand. They cut off her hand." Olivia grasped her right arm under the wrist in an agony of red stump, covered in scabs. A fluid sobbed bandage sat discarded on the foot of her bed. Her eyes regarded them in disinterest. Olivia knew this girl had been here a long time, maybe even longer than her. She had looked at her, just like a part of her were there. She looked, the rest of her escaped inside. Olivia knew all about it. She tried it herself. In a soft monotone, she said, "They ate it, my hand. They brought it in here on a plate, and after to show me, only my bones were left. They said it tasted delicious. They said my flesh was delicious." The girl turned her head at a wall, seeing the only thing she could see. Olivia said, "We're getting out of here." Still facing the wall, the girl said, "No one gets out of here. They told me that." Olivia's voice hardened. "They were wrong. We're getting out. You're coming with us." The girl didn't move. The wall held her in complete interest. Lucy took her clothes to the closet. Track pants and a sweatshirt. Must have been easier to shop. Same clothes, same sizes. Lucy said, "Let me help you. Come on, put these on." The girl moved mechanically. Lucy manipulated her arms to get the sweatshirt on and pulled her off of the bed and pants. The girl lifted her legs and helped her distract to do with a tug of the touch. All while Olivia's heart pounded, punching against her ribs. They were taking too much time. They have to go. While dressing the girl, Lucy said, "How'd you do it? How'd you get out?" "I killed him." Lucy's head whipped around. "Both of them?" And Olivia shook her head. "No, just Gorilla Man." "The other guy wasn't with them?" "No, just him. But they're always come together. Always. Not this time." "How'd you kill him?" "I bit his neck open." At that, the girl with no hand smiled. A small smile, but it was there all the same. And it gave Olivia hope. Oh, man, my back. Oh. And that is, for right now, The Dollhouse. We've read 26 pages today. Isn't that 25? Still, ain't that insane? Let me add it to the checklist. Whoop, whoop. There we go. So next time we're reading pages 44 to 64. Or at least I think that's 60. Yeah, that's 64. 44 to 64. And wow, it took us 50 minutes to read that. That's insane. But that's also because this book is huge. So one page is actually 2 pages, which is pretty nuts. But hey, as long as you guys are enjoying it, I don't care. This book is very, how do you say, adult? Meant for adults. So it's very weird for us to read it. But at the same time, you know, honestly, it's not that bad of a read. 44 to 64, 66, 64, 13. Huh. Okay, so maybe next episode is shorter than I think. So it's 6 to 12. Oop, and we got our first movement. Whoop. There we go. Oh, maybe a little higher than that. Yeah, that works. So, I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. People like to be efficient. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time.